first panel, an odd choice of first panel, but I'm excited. Welcome, everybody. This is the first panel, an odd choice of first panel, but I'm excited about it because I haven't been able to do this in a long, long time. So ages ago, I had a podcast. My name is Kinggath. If you're not familiar, I am in charge of the Sim Settlements mods. Recently started getting into some Skyrim stuff, and I am joined today by some folks that know an awful lot more than I do. We have got today Elminster, hero of mod authors everywhere since 2006. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, great to be here.
And of course, we also have Eckserah, I think I said that correctly, who is the master of all data mining for Fallout 76, among other talents. But that is, I think, what you're most well known for, yes?
Yeah, that's definitely the big thing.
So today we wanted to talk about tools that make it possible to mod these games. And it's really interesting to me what's going on under the hood of these. With 76, I'm super interested on the things you've discovered, because it is so strange to me to this day that they managed to take the creation engine, which has been notoriously single player for decades, and turned it into a multiplayer game, and like what that looks like under the hood and how you've been able to explore that. And then I'm really interested in hearing about how this went from like this, basically a viewer where you were just digging in to look at what's going on under the hood at Oblivion into like the most important tool in the Bethesda modding scene. So I'm hoping we can dig into your guys' histories here and kind of to learn about these tools, what got you guys obsessed with them. And then for anybody who's watching, who's maybe like wondering like, how do I get into this stuff? Because there are always questions from people who get excited about the idea of modding where they just don't know where to get started. So it would be interesting to hear like how you guys got into this stuff, your backgrounds and stuff. So Elminster, given you have the longer history, let's start with you. How did you get into this, and how did it turn into this probably gigantic part of your life?
Okay, well, it simply started with me trying to play Oblivion, which was pretty nice, but then I noticed there are like mods or so you can download, and I started downloading some mods, but whenever I had more than, say, 4 or 5 mods installed, things started to behave strangely, things didn't work correctly, and I was looking around. There were no real tools with which you could actually figure out what's going on. There was the construction set from Bethesda, and with that you can open a single mod, and you can see, well, you then see everything together, all the game data with the changes that this mod makes, but you can't really just focus on what exactly does this mod do, or how does this mod interact with another mod or something like that. And I really wanted my game to, be able to run with 20, 30, 40 mods together and actually work properly. So then I went out and looked for information about the file format and stuff, and there was a website, uesp.net, I think it was, which actually had information about the Oblivion file format. And then me being a lifelong software developer, just decided, well, I'm going to write some code just for myself to try and analyze what's going on here.
It's so funny that you said you were trying to get just 30 mods working together, and now you look at people's load orders in some of these like WAV attack lists, and there's people who run like thousands of mods now in Skyrim.
I know people who just cracked over 3,000 modules loaded in Skyrim Special Edition. So yeah, it's gotten a little bit bigger since then.
Well, and it's because of your mission, because without like people do that through Eckserah, right? Like that is like the number one source of patching. So like your little mission to get 30 mods has been magnified 100-fold now over the years, which is pretty cool.
Exactly. So I then started writing. First, I wrote a little program, just command line program that simply tried to dump the game data into human readable text formats. And out of that, I then moved on to TES4 View, which was simply a visual viewer that looks very similar to what Xedit is today already. Like people call it Excel for Bethesda games.
That is pretty accurate.
And yes. So I wrote this viewer, and then for the first time, I was able to actually, like, for every single record, show them side by side the different overrides, the changes that the different mods made to a single record. And that opened so much of my understanding of what is actually going on here and what are the sources of these problems. And then when I finally had figured out what are the problems, why are these mods not compatible with each other, I wanted to fix that. So I tried to actually then use that information I got out of Test4View to use the construction set from Bethesda to make these changes. And I found that very, very difficult to make these types of changes if you have to load every single mod in the test CS and try to find each of the records there and make change. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Which is why I ended up spending another few months upgrading my TES4 view to a TES4 edit, which then allowed me to, with simple drag and drop, create my compatibility patches or make changes to files and things.
It's crazy it's crazy how much that's stuck over the years. Like that general design pattern, like this idea of like a drag and drop Excel is kind of because like when I first used Xedit, I was like, why do people like this so much? It's so weird to use. And then someone showed me, no, you load a couple mods and then look at one form together and you get to see it all in a row and it's so nicely lined up. I was like, oh, there it is. And that's kind of like stuck through all these years between every game that you guys have gotten it working with. It always has that general feel and that core workflow to it to this day.
Yeah.
And that's because its origins were to make patches, not necessarily to make whole mods, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The purpose of what we call Xedit now, the X is actually not really the name. The X is a placeholder for whatever type of game it actually is editing. I just at some point got tired of saying TES4 edit and FO3 edit, and simply said, okay, put an X there and we are done.
I like Eckserah. That's a good name. That's a good name.
Yeah. So it was designed in the first step to simply show things side by side to understand compatibility issues.
And it does a phenomenal
out of that, the editing mode simply developed out of that, keeping exactly the same view and just being able to easily move data back and forth between different files. And that really was the core of what Xedit was supposed to be. And the fact that you can use it to simply create new mods from scratch and things like that wasn't exactly planned. That's simply a consequence of being able to edit absolutely everything that is in these game files.
And it's since evolved. It has a lot of very cool features, one of which I want to talk about a lot, but I don't want to leave X here silent the whole time. So I want to jump over to him for a minute, but I definitely want to come back because I want to talk about your Pascal integration because it's amazing. And I just did something really cool with it yesterday. But X, you also, so like, we were just talking about the viewing of the original viewer that was before Xedit. It was a viewer, and like those bones have made your job probably a hell of a lot easier trying to data mine 76.
Oh yeah. When I got into this, I started playing 76, and there were a lot of bugs. Everybody knows about how buggy 76 was on launch.
Oh, we remember.
And I was like, there's got to be something, because I've done reverse engineering on other games in the past to help report bugs and stuff like that in a more detailed manner. And so I figured I'd do the same kind of thing here. And then I was looking through the game files, and I was looking up the file types, and I found Xedit, and I was like, oh, this is great. And then I opened it, and I was like, there are a lot of errors. 76 was not a priority for Xedit at the time. And so I took it upon myself joined the server. I got a lot of help from Elm. And this is Eckserah was actually my first Pascal project.
And that's a tough one to learn. I remember the first time. I think I first learned it because of Eckserah, because I really wanted to do something. And she's an oldie. She's a strong language, but it was like digging into the archives to find tutorials and learning resources for it.
Like, I don't even touch some of like the deeper core of Eckserah because I'm afraid that I will break everything, which I most likely will. But through my reverse engineering, I was able to find the loaders for the records and start mapping those into Eckserah for until it stopped throwing errors at me. Well, I say that, but there are still a lot of errors that happen because of the fact that 76 is a very bloated file and has a lot of stuff left over from Fallout 4.
Interesting. Because it started out. I mean, they've acknowledged that it started out as just a fork of Fallout 4 at some point, right? They're like, let's see what happens when we get multiplayer in here, and then it turned into its own thing. So what inspired you to get into 76 data mining? Was it just you were just trying to see what the bugs were? Was the motivation that you would then send those over to Bethesda, or were you thinking that you might have been able to figure out how to do patches because we could patch every other Bethesda game?
That was kind of part of it, and then I realized I was way out of my depth with that because there were a lot of changes between like how Fallout 4 and how Fallout 76 work because there's a lot of stuff handled by the server. So,
sure, yeah, because obviously you cannot have a multiplayer game with every client deciding the rules. That just doesn't work well.
Exactly, and eventually, like I had because I was in some different 76 servers, and like I'd start like, oh, I found going through the files just to look at stuff. I found this cool thing. I found that cool thing, and then people started coming to me asking me questions, and I got very, very tired of it very, very fast. Being in like 20 or so servers and having everybody coming to me asking questions. So I created a server and had the like top people in all of those servers join that server so that I could just put it in one place.
Right. It became like a little wiki of sorts. It's for you to...
Yeah. That's how the 76 data mining server came about. It was actually private for like a year before I opened it public. And then
it's quite popular now. I joined it the other day to try and learn some more, and I was like, oh man, there's a ton of people in here.
When it went from a couple hundred people to 2,000 people within like 24 hours.
Wow.
when we opened it public, because we had YouTubers like Juicehead, we had people in all these other servers that were like, oh yeah, they just opened up public. If you have questions, you don't have to ask me anymore. You can just go in there and ask your questions.
Need you your own GPT bot, huh, to keep up with all of it. But it's interesting with 76 that you can still open the files. And I know before we got started on the call, you were talking about how there was some compression that happens now that makes it a little bit. It's harder to tinker with things and whatnot. But in those early days when you were able to finally get past some of these hurdles, and you worked with LM and stuff to get the version of Xedit that we have today for 76, like what has been what do you think the biggest benefit of being able to do all this has been? Because obviously we can't make like single player mods like we can for other games in the Bethesda series, other than you could do like texture replacers and such. And I know like I had made a HUD replacer at one point for 76. Like you can do like local stuff, but there's not a lot you can do in functionality wise. But like, so there's got to be some that you've been able to pull off. So what do you think what's the coolest thing you've been able to figure out during all this, whether it be a mod or, being able to get a fixture to Bethesda or whatever it is? What's the coolest thing that's come out of this, digging into these files like this?
Well, we actually have Bethesda devs in my server now that we communicate with and give bug reports straight to.
Oh, that's amazing.
It helps the game a lot because we have a lot of knowledgeable people. Like, I figured the basic stuff out and told other people about it, and they dug deeper into it. There's one person in the server who is like the all-knowing about like damage values and how exactly they work. And people go to even the devs sometimes go to him to talk about like balance changes, like what would be the best way to go about this. He makes a ton of suggestions, but the I think the best thing was at one point on the PTS they had some BOS broadcasts that they had put in that only people doing data mining would have been able to go in and solve it. Like they put it in there, like it was these messages that you could hear in game,
Okay.
but there were things like there was steganography involved. There was some of it was Morse code. Like there was like 3 or 4 different ways that they encrypted those messages that only if you were data mining would you have actually been able to figure all of them out.
Also, they like basically gave you guys a puzzle to solve.
Yeah, and
That's
that
awesome.
was when we realized that they had done that specifically because of of our community. Like that was one of the coolest things. That and the guide stones that never ended up getting implemented.
The
There
guide
were
zones. What is that?
So there were bits and pieces. The guide stones were actually there, but they never did anything with them.
Okay.
But there was a cut quest where in a terminal they had these messages, and in the script notes it had the translation of them, and so we used those characters to decode what was on the guide stone. Otherwise, the guide stone was just there, and I don't remember what it said, but it was an actual like message as to like some big thing they were originally going to do with aliens.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's always fun with Fallout how they've managed to kind of weave in like every sci-fi trope, and then there's some paranormal, there's aliens, there's practically undead type things. There's a little bit of everything.
All the cryptids,
Yeah.
especially in 76.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
just keep
leaned
putting
into
more
it.
and more. I remember the when the Sheep Squatch came out, like it was the same kind of thing. It was a slow release. Like they put hints here and there. There was a random encounter with a super mutant that wouldn't attack you, and he was at 1 health, and he would just be saying about how like this white monster killed his brothers, and you'd be sitting there, you'd be so sad for him because like he's limping along, basically crying about it, and then like the Sheep Squatch, like nowadays you'll actually know it's about the Sheep Squatch because
Yeah.
you will have seen it.
Right.
Um,
But they left a breadcrumb trail before that, leading up to it. That is one of
Yeah.
the cooler things that happens in some of the live service type games if you stick around with them. Like I've had plenty of time in WoW and Destiny where I've got to see that kind of stuff unfold. It's really rewarding. It's one of the redeeming qualities of those kind of games. I'm not a huge fan of the online game mostly because of my own addiction patterns. Like I got to be careful about them. Way too many hours in WoW. But that is a really cool part about it is the where you get to see them tell a story over time like that. That's really cool that they do that.
yeah.
So, Elm, you seem to have something to chime in on 76. What was your experience like? Because you messed with it a little. It sounds like I don't think you did all of it. But what was your experience with setting up the 76 reading?
Now, just to explain a little bit background, for Oblivion, I had the record formats and stuff. Somebody else worked that already out. There was the website that could basically just implement that from the information that was already there. For every game after that, I was actually one of the primary persons who did all the reverse engineering of the file formats and actually figure out how all this works. And especially for FO3, Fallout New Vegas, so these early games, I had a process. You can figure out some things simply from looking at the files. But at some point, when you really want to go into the details, what is exactly, if you have larger subrecords that contain multiple values and things, it gets difficult simply from looking at the files to figure out what the structure is. So my usually process at that point then involved using the whatever it was called, GEC at that time, to actually create test modules which just one specific change to a record and then compare these and then use that to reverse engineer the actual file format. Now that approach obviously breaks down once we get to Fallout 76 because there is no official editor.
Right.
And so I actually created Fallout 76 edit initially just based on the game files, and did as much as I could simply from looking at the files. But then I was at the point where I couldn't easily continue, and that was the stage at which Eckserah actually came in then, and has been extremely helpful with going out, looking at the game exe, decoding, decompiling the game code, and looking at the loader code in the game to actually fill in this missing information that we didn't have because we didn't have any type of official editor to create test files.
Right. Is that why, so like periodically when I'm using any version of Xedit, whether it be for Tez or Fallout or whatever, I'll find like spots where it just says unknown. Is that like stuff that you haven't solved yet?
Yes.
Got it,
okay. That's basically things like when I start reverse engineering the file format, there's a part that is pretty easy. So you have the overall structure with you have records, and the records contain sub-records, and this part of the file structure is pretty much well preserved between all the Bethesda games. What's different from game to game is what type of records there are. They all have like this 4-character signature that identifies what the record is, and what sub-records are contained in this record. Now, at the file format level, you simply have records, and then you have a linear list of sub-records, and the only thing you know for these sub-records is, again, a 4-character signature and how big they are. And they are in one linear list. But if you look in Xedit, you see there's this complex tree structure, of how the values interrelate with each other. So the first thing you then need to actually figure out in this reverse engineering is, I have a linear list of these subrecords, and how do these subrecords maybe form arrays or structures, or how are they actually structured?
And what is the format you're looking at this data in? Is it just, are you like looking at raw hex trying to figure this out, or do you have some like?
No, I have lots of code inside Xedit itself, which does a lot of processing and figures all this information out based on the existing files, and gives me the basic information I need to start working on the record definitions. And with every additional run of the program, it then points out errors between my record definitions and what is actually there, and I can keep refining the record definitions until the record definitions completely match all the records that exists in the files that I have.
Got it. So over the years of developing this, you've kind of turned it into a machine that develops itself, in a sense.
Yes, there's a lot of structure in Xedit itself, which helps with this reverse engineering approach. Like, right at the beginning, when I was working on Oblivion, that wasn't really a consideration, because I had a relatively complete description of the whole file format, and there was relatively little that was missing from that.
Now, where did that come from? Because because I've looked into that stuff as well. So this is like really deep nerd stuff, guys listening. Because there's like hex descriptions of like, it'll be like the first byte represents this, and then these 16 bytes represent that up on UASP, because we did that to develop an online tool for ESP generation.
And that was already the website I looked at.
So who made
at the time I started UES? I'm not sure.
Because that person has like, was it Bethesda? That's what I'm curious. Like, where did the origin of this come from? That'd be very interesting to know.
Well, even before that, with Morrowind, there were already third-party tools that were able to read the file formats and do something with it. And the file format of Oblivion is just a very significant evolution of what Morrowind started with.
Got it.
But that there's a clear sequence to be seen how these file formats developed.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I was curious how far back, because at some point somebody was either they got a leak from somebody, or somebody was in the trenches and like figuring this stuff out byte by byte, and it's like, man, we are standing on the shoulders of giants.
That's what it basically comes down to. Like, when we look at the VMAT record, or the virtual machine adapter descriptor, the thing, that is one single subrecord with a very, very, very complex and involved binary data structure inside.
There's a lot going on in that. Yeah, because that's all, because it has to hold a lot of script
properties, fragments, all this stuff. And the file format itself doesn't help you with that. Up to the subrecord, you have a clear structure that you can follow in the file format, and you can easily see what this is, and there's not much thought required because it's a fixed structure that you can simply decode.
Yeah.
But once you get at this single subrecord level, you simply have, I don't know, 1,000 bytes and no idea what they are.
So how do you get to? So how do you solve that? Is that just like you just trial and error things, change a byte and see what happens?
At that point, you basically look at a hex editor and you look at the numbers, and you can start seeing patterns. Like there's the number 5, and then I have 5 times after that something that looks like a similar structure. So that's probably the count of an array of 5 things that follow. And you just need to keep working on it. And you can, with a lot of understanding how such underlying data structures work, from hex values, start figuring out the structure and dig deeper and deeper into that.
You're like real life Neo. You can see the matrix. You look at these hex blocks and you just see Bethesda game structures. That's awesome.
And it just has gotten a lot easier now that Eckserah and a few other people have been helping with actually looking at the loader code in the decompiled game.exe, so that you don't just have to guess from the data what it could be. You can actually see the game, it loads an integer here and a float value there and a form ID there. And then it's gotten a lot easier to create all these structures.
Got it. So you're doing a lot of... So they're doing a lot of like live... Well, actually, you can answer that. You're doing a lot of like loading up the game and watching the code operate from a debugger, right? So that you can see kind of where it's accessing things and kind of get some more hints into what's going on. Is that roughly what's happening?
Personally, I use IDA
okay.
to decompile the game and then give me something in a more readable format than hex bytes. It's an extremely useful tool for reverse engineering. But there are times where I do have to, load up the game and load up something like Cheat Engine in order to be able to easily, write a script that can go dump all of these values that correspond to this, so that we can have an idea of what they are.
So does the two tools work in tandem, that you can use that information to help decode some of this stuff that you're stuck on Elminster with the like individual, like what does this sub-record actually mean? Are you able to, so you guys are able to use these two data points of like attacking it from the hex or attacking it from IDA and kind of slowly suss out what everything is?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's basically it.
Very cool. Very cool. So it's team effort. It's a team effort. You can't build this monster solo.
Like for Starfield now, I think there were 10, 15 people that were involved in the effort in the end to get the Starfield record definitions to the point where we currently are, which is pretty complete.
Nice.
But that was a really big effort. I alone put in almost 500 hours.
Holy cow.
Just to do all this reverse engineering effort on Starfield, which is the reason why we have a pretty complete Starfield edit long before Bethesda even released their editing tools, because over the years we have really refined this whole process of how do we get from the data files and from the exe to working record definitions. And Fallout 76 has definitely helped creating the foundation that allowed us to get this done very quickly for Starfield.
Sure. So how did the decoding of 76 and Starfield, how did that compare to the decoding of Fallout 4, or were you not around for that? I know you took a hiatus from Xedit for a while. I don't know.
Took a hiatus. I was not involved in the initial creation of the records definition for Skyrim and Fallout 4.
Okay. So they didn't have quite the process that you guys have created since then for those games.
They didn't really have that process. There was Skyrim edit versions and Fallout 4 edit versions before the official tools came out, but there were a lot of holes in the record definitions at that time still, because in many cases, as I said earlier, the normal process is you figure out as much as you can just from the files, and after that you start using the official editor to create test files. Mm-hmm. And so both for Skyrim and Fallout 4, the record definitions only really came together after the official tools were available. And the fact that there was no official tool for Fallout 76 is what has led me and Eckserah and others into developing these processes and tools to actually be able to do all this reverse engineering and decoding in the absence of some type of official editor.
Yeah, it makes it a little harder to verify. And 76 is like an extreme challenge too, because even if you had an official editor, it doesn't naturally load plugins, right? Like at least with Starfield, if you had like a somewhat version of a plugin, you could theoretically load it into the game and check it out and see what it does. And with 76, it was intentionally designed against that. So did that add a lot of challenge to the decoding 76, just the fact that you couldn't load even into the game to check things?
Well, I'll let Eckserah answer that one.
Yeah, combined with the fact that there's no console in 76 either.
Oh, true.
So, like in Fallout 4, you can actually like look at something, and I don't remember the command, but you can type a command, and it can give you what the form is.
Right.
You can't do that in 76. Well, technically. There have been tools that have been able to like read the game's memory and find some of that information because of the similarities between Fallout 4 and 76.
Yeah.
Like toggle collision was so in Fallout 4 it sets a single byte to true.
Okay.
And for a while in 76 that was actually existed in the game in the same manner.
Okay.
So if you were so inclined, you could set that byte and you would just go through everything.
It's amazing that there wasn't just way more. Like I'm sure there was plenty of like. I remember there was a lot of hacking in the early days of it, but that there wasn't just astronomically more with how skilled the communities of these games are at tearing them apart, right? Like there's just, you gave a multiplayer game to a bunch of people who like taking your stuff apart and putting it back together again. It's just kind of funny.
Right. And like I will say like the some of the unique ways that the player base has been able to break the game. Like on PC the hacked weapons thing was just bonkers.
Yeah.
Like you basically would use the whole workshop thing to place an object, transform it into the weapon you wanted, and then add the weapon mods that you wanted to it. It was.
That's so funny. Yeah,
I remember
if any community is going to find the holes, it's going to be Bethesda's community.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
At one point, someone gave me a 2-shot explosive combat knife. It didn't do anything.
Yeah,
but like it was interesting to have.
Right. It's just a collector's item.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Bethesda did a huge wipe on any weapons that had legendary modifiers that they weren't supposed to, or mods in general.
Yeah,
because legendary mods are just the same thing. It's just using a different mod slot.
Right, just a different slot on it. So the same basic thing, which is why there's like mods for Fallout 4 that let you just attach as many legendary things as you want, right, in all the different slots. The 76 we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. 76 is kind of a unique case because it's constantly evolving as a game. So with Fallout 4 and Skyrim and Oblivion, and actually I think. Actually, I got to back up a little bit. So you started with Oblivion, Elminster, and then some folks did Tez and Fallout 4 in your absence. And I know now it supports even older games. So it supports, well, I guess, what order did they come in?
No.
It supports Fallout 3 and New Vegas?
I did more than just Oblivion.
Yeah.
I had Tez 4 edit, and then Fallout 3 came out. At the time, I was actually on vacation and just had a little laptop with me. And someone sent me the Fallout 3 ESM file. I didn't actually have the game at all, just that one single file while I was on vacation.
Okay.
And within about 72 hours or so, I had a most basic Fallout 3 edit running. Based on the code structure I already had for the Tez 4 edit. And when I started all this process in the beginning, I was thinking about having different programs for the different games or so. But when I actually got to the point to develop that, I figured out it's easier if I just leave it all together and just switch between different game modes.
Okay.
And that's why you really have like Xedit now, the exe file. There's one single Xedit exe file for all the different game modes. And if you simply rename that exe file to test4 edit, FO3 edit, SSE edit, and start it, it automatically switches game mode to that mode and behaves like that particular game requires.
Nice. Very, very unique feature. I don't know any other software that does something quite like that.
Yeah. Well, the thing with the file name was simply a simplification I made so that I don't have to explain to people how to use parameters to start the game into different game modes or something like that.
Right.
So I simply look at the exe name of the exe that is being started and get the game mode and stuff information out of there instead of having to look at parameters. So I did Fallout 3 edit. Lots of work went into that. I did Fallout New Vegas edit. And sometime between Fallout New Vegas and Skyrim, I became the father of twins, and
that'll keep you busy.
That pretty much led to the complete evaporation of any spare time. Up to that point, Xedit was actually like closed source. I hadn't published the source code. I was the only one working on it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But when it became clear to me, I don't have the time anymore to keep maintaining this and working on this, I decided to open source it under the MPL and hoped that somebody in the community can pick that up and keep going with it.
Yeah.
And we got very lucky that we got a number of people. I hope I get the name right.
I was gonna say I don't know how to say some of their names.
Skilaf, HLC,
yeah,
later Shazon, Paya, that all decided to jump in there and help and keep that project going while I was otherwise busy.
You guys are legends. Thank you.
They did a fantastic job of then aiding the record definitions for Skyrim and later Fallout 4, and they did a lot of work also on new systems like the string files that didn't exist before Skyrim yet, so they had to do reverse engineering for that and actually make quite structural changes to the code to support that properly, and so they did a lot of work during my hiatus.
And they kept it alive, and they kept it as one of the most important tools in the community. So it was
Exactly.
It was phenomenal that they stepped up to the plate. Very, very cool, you guys. Because I can't imagine editing Skyrim or Fallout 4 without Xedit anymore. It just seems so crazy. That's such an important part. Not even just patching, just general making mods anymore. So let's talk about that, because I do want to come back to 76 again. We started talking about this, but now I've got this little thread. So it started out as a way for you to do patches, and then as a byproduct, it just turned out you could make mods with that. What was the moment where you took it and kind of went more into that? Because I feel like there's some sort of inflection point where it became almost more of a modding tool than a patching tool. And to me, the moment was when we started getting where we could run Pascal scripts against it, because then that enabled things you couldn't possibly do in the creation kit.
Oh, it actually was long before that already. It was during the Oblivion times already.
Okay.
The one of the big mod collections, mod integration systems during the Oblivion time that came out was FCOM. And so that was a combination of, let me see, F, Francisco's, C, O. Not sure what the C was. O was. It was four big mods that existed before that.
Okay.
And they all got integrated with each other in this FCOM package, and that was basically creating a complete new mod, many new files from scratch to make all the other work together. And Martingen from what was it? I don't remember the name anymore.
That's right.
a lot of modders came to me and said, how can I do this and that for like I want to just edit my mod in Xedit. I don't just want to make patches. And I spent a lot of time developing functionality during these early 2 years or so to really support people that wanted to create complex mods that were difficult to create in the official tools because you had to use many manual steps all over the place. And that was really the start where people already started like creating complete mods in TES4 Edit.
Mm-hmm. Just made a lot of repetitive steps, especially just even the things like the drag and drop can be just massive time savers.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So
No,
that back then you think back in Oblivion is when it really kicked off in that direction, and it became more.
It already started with quite a few people creating mods that were really just created in X or in TES4 Edit.
Right. Yeah, it was Oblivion came out during my World of Warcraft addiction, so I missed the boat on Oblivion. So I'm learning a lot about the development of the scene right now, about like how things paced out. My big throws into the Bethesda modding scene were with Skyrim. That's when I really got into it. But the genesis of the tool as a viewer into a mod creation is very, very interesting. That you started out with patches, and then now it's just kind of like the staple tool. Because I know there's a lot of people now, you said people were making mods just with it back then. That's still the case today, where there's a lot of folks who don't even open the creation kit. I know a ton of huge mods that were made with zero creation kit because they're just like, no, I don't like that. I don't want to wait for that thing to load, and I'm just used to Xedit now, which is crazy. Because it looks, you joked about it being like Excel, and it kind of is. It's like big tables of data, and it's so weird to me that people create these insanely impressive mods just all by these data tables. Again, going back to that Neo thing, if people they see the matrix, they see this stuff, this pile of data, and they see a video game.
The thing is, once you actually understand the underlying game systems, and to create really good mods, you really need to understand what the game engine actually ends up doing with that information. Then the way Xedit displays the data is actually not for everything, but for a lot of like base game data, weapons, armor, whatever. It's much easier to understand just looking at the data put together like that, instead of having to go into CK and click through multiple tabs and looking at data displayed in different ways in different places. There's a fundamental structure in how Xedit does display its data, and it's very, very consistent.
Right. Yeah. Once you learn how to edit one record, you know the basics enough to get to the others and kind of tinker with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas in CK, if you look at different types of records, they are displayed differently, probably because different developers have worked on implementing these editing forms over time, and that there's a certain lack of consistency in how information is presented. Now, obviously, once you get to world space contents, where you visually place models and stuff, that is the strength of the official tools, because I haven't got all the code to be able to load all the models and visually represent the three-dimensional world.
Right.
Because these NIF files are basically serialized game nodes from the scene graph. And to really work with these well, especially if you want to display a complete cell or something like this, you more or less need the engine code, or you have to replicate the complete engine code from Bethesda.
Which is a lot.
And that is obviously a huge amount of work, and I don't see the advantage that could be gained from
we've already
putting all that work into Xedit, because we have the official tools for that, and they work well enough for that.
Yeah, it would be crazy to reinvent that wheel. I can loop you in here, Eck. So 76, you've gotten to sneak peek into some of this stuff. I know you've had moments where there's almost like Easter eggs being dropped in for you guys. So you really, which has probably kept your attention on it too, to pay attention to all these things. And I know you said that, one of your hopes was to try and solve some of these bugs and get them to Bethesda. So have you seen direct signs of like your work resulting in things that drove you nuts in the game being fixed?
Oh yeah. I at one point found a security flaw where the password was being stored in memory in plaintext if you logged in through the game itself instead of like through the launcher.
Yeah.
And so I reported that to them. And so I eventually got told that it was patched. So I went in to check it, and then I got banned.
Oh no!
I got banned
that was
for
the
13
patch.
days.
They added an auto ban system for Eckserah.
They had tried to patch it, but they didn't do it well.
Okay.
So, but the way I was using memory reading tools in order to be able to find out what was going on, and they had added specific detection for those tools, and so I got banned as if I was hacking. And I was banned for 13 days, but like by that point I was already on really good terms with the community managers.
Okay.
And so I was constantly I made tickets saying hey, what's going on, why am I banned. They were pushing back as well, and eventually I got a call with the head of what was it, the head of their in-game security,
okay,
or whatever, the guy that made the decision, and he's like, okay, well, we're gonna unban you, just don't do it again. And I'm like, I'm gonna do it again because this is what I'm doing. I'm helping. I'm not like
right. Your intent is not malicious or gaining advantage.
Right.
You're trying to make the game you like better, right? Like
exactly.
I know I don't want to ruin anybody's thoughts on you, but I know you don't have a lot of time to play the game anymore because now the game for you is tearing apart the game, right? Like, that's what happens to all of us. Once we see how the sausage is made, we just want to like work on that instead of playing the actual game. So you started with it as a love for the game, and now it evolved to a love for this challenge, I guess. Would that be accurate, or is it because you have so many friends who play the game that you're helping them out? Like, what's the drive? What keeps you going on this?
I have a lot of friends who are still interested in the game. I have people who still constantly come to me asking questions about it, and if I don't keep updating it for 76, nobody's going to.
Yeah, I think Elminster made that very clear. He's very happy with you. Please stay around.
But I have a lot of friends, and I have this massive community that I built up from the ground, and there have been quite a few times where I felt like dropping everything and leaving it, but I just can't.
It's just a part of you now.
Yeah.
So same question to you, Elminster. Like, what keeps you going now on Eckserah? I know you too are in the same state as a lot of us get when we're developing for a long time. Is we no longer care about the games. The game is the new thing that you're building. So like, what keeps you going and motivated to keep working on this, even as you're further and further away from your beloved Oblivion?
Well, on the one hand, it's a very interesting technical challenge. I like this type of challenge and working on this. And on the other hand, yes, there is a pretty huge community by now, and I really don't want to let everybody down. I mean, if I would stop working on this, I'm sure some people would try to pick it up and keep going. But especially in X-Edit, like with Starfield now, it wasn't just create new record definitions, which most people that contribute could probably get going. But there's a lot of new underlying systems that I had to implement from scratch, and I'm not sure in how far the rest of the community would be up to actually carrying that torch if I would to stop working on this.
Yeah.
And I really like that I can keep contributing to the general modding community for these games.
I very much appreciate it. I definitely could not do my stuff without Eckserah, that's for sure. Today I had yesterday now, I made a little tool to let players design a flag in game, and it required 300,000 records. Well, you can be sure as hell I wasn't generating those records by hand, and it only was possible because of Xedit. So like there's certain mods that can only exist with your tools. So it's very, very cool that you're sticking around for them, even if you're not playing the games much anymore, if at all. So thank you for doing that. I think.
Yeah, I think I did. Well, I obviously played Oblivion a lot. I played some Fallout 3. For pretty much every game after that, I think I have less than 10 hours playtime listed on Steam, because basically all my time went into actually working on the tools, and I just started the games when I had to try out files I generated or compare something, how it looks in game with the game data I'm looking at and things like that.
Yeah.
So I really don't have a huge number of hours in the games, because all my focus is actually on working out these technical issues and understanding all that.
Yeah, your 500 hours of gameplay went into developing the next version of Xedit instead of the game itself, which is to
much.
all of our benefit, and I think to players too, because without that, like I said, tons of these mods wouldn't exist, and especially like there's a hunger to edit these games right away when they come out. I mean, there are day zero mods for all these games. And I think a lot of that hunger and inspiration would die out over time. And so without community tools to like jumpstart and enable those folks, I don't think we would have even a fraction of the mods we do. So I think like you're doing the Lord's work in our community, because like without your tools, if we waited for the Bethesda to get out official tools, like a lot of that inspiration would have died out before they got a chance to let it out there. All right, before we go any further, I'm going to pause here. And I want to thank Kenneth and the rest of the folks at Fallout for Hope, as well as the people in the Bethesda modding community who rallied around to organize this event. The tools that we're talking about today have enabled countless passionate people over the years, and they are making some of the things that you're going to see over the next 2 days. So I'm really grateful for this chance to shine a spotlight on some of the folks behind the scenes. I also want to turn the spotlight to Make-A-Wish International. In addition to showcasing awesome projects throughout the Bethesda modding community, part of the goal of C3 is to draw some attention to this great charity. I'm sure everyone is familiar with their mission, so if you can spare a few dollars to help out, check out the description of the stream. There's a link to donate below. Thank you guys, and back to the podcast.
What you said about the tools and people wanting mods from the first day. When Starfield came out, so after a week or two, I sort of had the understanding. Well, my point of view is perhaps not generally applicable, but my thought was they developed the wrong game. Like they developed Starfield as, this is the game, that is what we want you to play. This is our game world. It's perfect like this. Play this game. Whereas what most people actually want is a hosting platform for user-made contents with a nice default story and world setting that they can build up on. Yeah, so that's a very different focus.
Yeah,
and I think that is part of what we have been seeing over the last few months, where the interest of Starfield has gone down significantly, because people bought Starfield based on their ideas or their previous experience with Skyrim and Fallout 4, where a lot of these people only started playing the games long after mods were available and things like that. And they got Starfield based on that goodwill and expected, well, it's going to be like that.
Right. We're off to a decent start with mods. Like I think Nexus just passed 8,000 mods the other day on Starfield. So like there's still that creative hunger, because I want to say Skyrim is at, well, special edition, obviously, like the original Skyrim. It gets messy when you're trying to count those. But I think Skyrim's got I want to say 140,000. I might be off on that. But still, like to have almost, closing in on 10,000 mods after just a couple of months with no official tools, pretty impressive. So there's clearly there's still the hunger for people to get more mods for Starfield. And I know that, I think everybody now has heard the tale of some of the problems with the plugin setup for Starfield, and that there's some shortcomings there that You have laid out some pretty simple ways that they could be resolved. So, fingers crossed, we get that one day. We won't know until we get official tools and give some more feedback. But you've dug in, you found some roadblocks in there, but you still created the skeleton of the tools. You solved all of the records that you could. And actually, did you solve all the records? Are there like holes still in Starfield, or were you able to solve it with you guys'
There
new
are
pattern?
no huge amounts of unknown data left. And the biggest thing that is left with Starfield is they developed a completely new way of how they store certain data.
Okay.
Like the basic structure for all these games is you have records, you have sub-records, and the sub-records have largely a relatively simple structure and contain a few different values that are specific to this sub-record, and you have a relatively good structure in all this data, and you can reverse engineer this quite well. Now, what they did with Starfield is that they actually implemented something at the game engine level. It's a programming technique. It's called reflection, where a running program can more or less like inspect itself.
Okay.
And find out there's this object. That object had the following fields, and the value of these fields are. And you can do that dynamically at runtime without actually writing code individually. And what they did is they used this system to then take certain game data, and instead of putting it into this nice record, sub-record structure that we had up to now, they simply use this reflection and say, here is my set of objects in memory, write them all into this big binary blob with a relatively complex structure, and later load it back out. And this type of approach, the way they did it, basically means that you need to replicate the structure of the in-game objects to be able to read and write all this. And that they don't use it everywhere, but there are certain places where they use this type of data structure, and that makes it very, very difficult to support these in Xedit.
Right.
Right now, I'm waiting for some other developers to do the work with actually reverse engineering this format. This is like a complete new file format inside the existing file format.
Got it. So it's gonna it muddies the way Xedit has been developed, right? Where you're able to have this consistent format, and you're used to the way these files are working, and now all of a sudden there's just this new crazy variable that doesn't fit the pattern in any way.
Yes.
So far, now, does that have you found the major things that's gonna let's assume the worst, and that they don't change the way that's set up, and no one is able to solve it. Obviously somebody will. These people in this community are geniuses, but if they didn't, what kind of things are locked out behind that you can see so far? Is it the ship templates or planets, or what is it that you think is behind that wall right now?
Well, actually, you can see that in Xedit right now.
Okay.
Basically, all the records that contain this reflection data are ones that you currently can't do a copy as override on.
Okay.
So it's very obviously which data that is. It's mostly some. They changed some existing things like image adapters. They changed to this format, and there are some other record types where they basically threw away the old format, and now there's that whole record, which has one sub-record, which is called reflection, which then contains however many hundreds, thousands bytes of complex data, instead of the nice structure with sub-records and things that you had before. I think weather records, cloud records, things like that. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, they have a mechanism now, components, where certain type of additional data can be added to certain records, and some of these also contain reflection. And interestingly, ship templates and so are largely editable.
Okay.
There is no real consistency in where they use these different formats. They have developed at least 4 or 5 different new ways of storing data that are used inconsistently in different types of the file format on top of the existing format.
Oh, okay.
And What I think happening is these 4 or 5 different ways of basically storing the same type of data in different ways is the result of different developers just creating their own thing and putting it on top of the underlying structure that they inherited from Fallout 4. And this could have all been better integrated into the same basic format that Fallout 4 and all their games have used, instead of putting big binary blobs on top in certain places. And that makes it much more difficult for something like Starfield Edit to exist.
Right.
Because it's simply much more complexity, and you have 4 or 5 different systems where it would have been possible to represent the same data using the systems that previously existed.
So now, given that, because this is a lot of technical stuff, and I know some folks who are listening aren't going to know all of what's going on here. Can you think of an example of like a specific type of thing that, like, from a player's perspective, like what's something that they right now they can't have modded, like something that might matter to folks?
Most of the weapon records actually include reflection data, so it's and that reflection data is used for particle effects and other effects, like I think the ammo counter on that you can see on weapon models and stuff like that. And the big problem I have is that this reflection data somewhere inside of it can contain form IDs.
Oof.
And if you copy data from one module to another, you need to adjust these form IDs.
Got it.
Because I cannot decode the reflection data currently, I can't tell you where in there are any form IDs, so I cannot rewrite them, which is why I can't allow copying that. That means one of the limitations right now is that most of the weapon records, you can't create overrides and make changes to the weapons. So if you wanted to go and say, I take an existing weapon and I want to increase the damage or something like that, you can't do that right now because the override record would need to contain this reflection data, and I would need to be able to rewrite the form IDs that are somewhere in that reflection data.
Okay.
So for all this, I put a lot of guardrails into Starfield Edit where all the things that I know will result in broken files if you do them are simply not allowed right now.
That makes sense.
Now, that's with the reflection data, that is simply a case of we haven't done enough reverse engineering yet and all the implementation work to actually represent that. That is something that can be done. In other places, we have found, and that's simply a consequence of them not developing the game, not developing the modding functionality before the initial game release and instead working on that now,
right,
is that like fundamental functions where in certain places form IDs have to be remapped by the game engine when it loads the file. Now, that doesn't matter if the file is the main game master, because in the main game master, they never need to remap anything.
Right.
So there are actually places and records where they simply haven't got the code right now to do this form ID remapping. As a consequence, you can't actually edit these types of, you can edit these type of records, but you can't write anything in these form IDs that would point to records you have newly created in a mod, because the game engine itself simply can't do the remapping when loading. So that is the other type of limitation. We have, on the one hand, the limitations that come from there are things in the file format that we simply can't edit yet for certain reasons. But on the other hand, we also have issues where we can edit the data, but we know that if we edit the data, the game engine as it stands right now cannot handle that, even though it is structurally and contents-wise correct data.
Got it.
So these are two different types of issues.
Right. So both of them are solvable on a long enough timeline, but the ideal would be Bethesda listens to some of the advice that you've put out there on how they could restructure some things in the game, so that way we can continue to operate with the knowledge and tools that we have. Right. That would be the best case scenario.
That would be the best case scenario.
Yeah. So who knows where it will land. Hopefully we'll find out soon. They did announce that they're planning on giving us modding tools this year. Granted, that's a hell of a long timeline, so who knew since we're in January. But I'm hopeful. I think like as a creation engine modder, like there's a lot of new tools on them. There are a lot of new toys I want to play with. Like so there's like some exciting new tech in there. And it is fun to see, you know, the Bethesda style of certain elements like the questing and things that, you know, feel familiar, and that being brought up to modern standards art wise. And you know, now we have proper PBR instead of some of the strange old things we have. So that actually leads me to another point, and maybe Eck, you can speak to this a little bit, because I know you have a little bit of experience messing with the NIF stuff now. I hear that Starfield's NIF system is quite strange in the way it's kind of like a container now, and it loads external data. Do either of you guys know anything about that? That I hear the NIF is quite a bit different in Starfield.
Yeah, no. The main thing they did is that they actually separated the mesh information, the vertex information, from like the additional attributes and stuff. So the actual underlying mesh is now in separate .mesh files, if I remember correctly. And this is actually, if I'm not mistaken, a standardized format that more or less directly can be loaded into the graphics card the way it is.
Okay.
Which is probably one of the reasons why they extracted that. And what's left over in the NIF files now is basically all the metadata around the actual mesh data. Yeah, so you have the mesh as a separate file, and in the NIF you have all the information that you previously had in the NIF, just minus the actual mesh.
So it's kind of like how
instead,
like we had like the B tri-shape data or whatever, that was just kind of the mesh, and you could like swap that out. It's kind of like that stuff now just lives in its own file.
That lives in its own file, and instead in the NIF you have a reference to the file name of where that data is.
Oh, okay.
Now, the thing you need to understand about the NIF format, we call it a format, but really, like all the ESP files, there is an underlying structure which has remained more or less unchanged. Yeah, so the fundamental structural way of how data is stored in these NIF files is relatively the same across all these games. But what data and exactly what values are stored is different from game to game. So the NIF format was never designed as a universal 3D graphics exchange format or anything like that. Instead, what the NIF format is that they simply take their in-memory objects that the game engine uses and serialize that into a file. As the game engine changes from game to game, the NIF format completely changes.
Got it.
Yeah, so the underlying structure, like in a file system, you have folders and you have files.
Yeah.
In the same way, you have nodes inside the NIF format, and that doesn't change. Yeah, so you have this underlying structure. But what folders you have and what files and so on, to speak about the analog here, that changes completely from game to game, because the game objects in memory have radically changed from game to game. So that is why you can't just take a NIF file from one game and somehow use it in the other, because they serialize completely different game objects.
Got it. Okay. But I've done quite a lot of NIF work in NIF scope. And because I've mostly worked in Special Edition and Fallout 4, the files look very, very, very similar. Is it because Skyrim Special Edition is basically the same engine as Fallout 4 effectively? Like, isn't that what the big upgrade was? It was like
this whole understanding of game engine, so it's very fuzzy.
Right.
It's not that they have like sort of a separate game engine and then they have the game that is built using that engine. So what really happens is that they had, like, say, Oblivion, the complete game code, and the game engine, if you say game engine, it's simply part of the total code of the game. Yeah, it's simply the term game engine is simply applied to all this code together that makes up the game.
Yeah.
And when they moved from Oblivion to Fallout 3, for example, they basically took the complete Oblivion source code, as it was, completely including also the module files, the ESM files and everything, and made a copy of all of this and then started modifying that
Right.
until it turned into Fallout 3.
Right. Yeah,
And
it's not like Unreal or Unity where it's like a core engine. I know it's a messy
yes,
talk we always discuss. I guess what I'm thinking
yes,
is was the fork of like Skyrim Special Edition was kind of like take what the improvements that they had brought to the Skyrim experience for Fallout 4 and then just like push them over. Like, oh, we can also have those back in Skyrim, like backported them to Skyrim essentially. I'm trying to figure out why the what you're talking about makes sense with the NIF format. I was just curious why the two formats for those two games are so similar. Like I was immediately at home messing around with both of them.
because they share, like, you have a complete uninterrupted sequence of this source code mutating from starting at Oblivion. Oblivion was very different from Morrowind, so I don't know how big a break between this is. But starting at Oblivion, you can see this continuous evolution and change of the code. So each of the games after Oblivion is simply taking the code from the previous game at some point and starting making modifications to it to make the next game. Now, in case of Skyrim Special Edition, I'm not sure if at some point they had Skyrim and then they created Fallout 4 and then they backported some of these changes back into Skyrim, or if Skyrim Special Edition, or what was published as Skyrim Special Editions later, was actually their test field to create new technology that they wanted to use in Fallout. So I'm not sure if the sequence is actually Skyrim to most of the code that's in Skyrim Special Edition and then Fallout 4, or if they went Skyrim and then Fallout 4 and then they put some of the code back into Skyrim. I'm not quite sure what actually the sequence of events here was.
We can just kind of theorize on that.
But like there is a lot of sideways motion of code after the fork has taken place. Like we can also see Fallout 76 is obviously forked of Fallout 4 in some point. And probably the point is before ESL got introduced in the Fallout 4 code base, because there's no ESL support in Fallout 76, so that split must have happened before that point.
That's very interesting, because you would think with the Atom Shop that would have been ideal, right? To have let them have infinite, effectively, purchases.
No, they pretty clearly split that code base off Fallout 4 before that. The same with the VR versions of Skyrim and Fallout 4. These also got split off the main games before the time that they introduced ESL support in the main games, which is why the VR versions didn't have ESL support, and they never ported that over in the game engine itself. Now, if we look at Starfield is pretty clearly, as far as I can see, forked off Fallout 4 at some point. But then there must have been a lot of like sideways transference coming from Fallout 76. So
so it's got, you can see bones from both games in the Starfield files.
You can see elements from both games, and you can see things that I'm relatively sure that Starfield didn't start out as like a fork of Fallout 76, because there's a lot in Fallout 76 that makes no sense in Starfield. But they did like a sideways transference of some of the code, some of the structures from Fallout 76 into Starfield.
So you're saying there's no secret multiplayer component hidden in Starfield waiting to be unleashed on us?
No, pretty sure about that. Yeah, and like Fallout 76 dropped a number of things structure-wise that existed in Fallout 4, which are present in Starfield. So it's pretty clear from that the origins of the Starfield code at some point came from the Fallout 4 code and didn't directly build on top of the Fallout 76 code.
Interesting. What is a feature that you see like that made you like draw that conclusion that was really obvious? Where like what was something you saw in the Starfield dissection where you're like, oh, I saw that when I was messing with 76?
there are simply a number of record types that simply don't exist in Fallout 76 that exist in both Fallout 4 and Starfield.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant the connection between Starfield and 76 are the same thing, where you're seeing like this record type
Starfield,
didn't exist in 4.
Again, there are record types that are new in Fallout 76, which turn up in Starfield.
Got it. Okay.
So they're very, very similar. Not always exactly identical, but they are very, very similar in most cases. If they use the same signature for the record, so that's pretty clear from these things to see that they moved the code sideways, did a cherry pick over from their 76 code base into the Starfield code base or something like that, to work on that.
Interesting. So there's features being juggled all between these games that are still kind of being produced. Did you see?
Yes.
Have you messed around with because I know the big thing, and we were going to touch on this earlier, with Skyrim being updated. Did that change anything fundamental in the file formats or anything that you had to do for the new Skyrim update?
There was one fundamental change with Fallout 4. At some point, they introduced a change where they actually increased the header version number of the file, which then allowed a larger form ID range basically for every module. Now, for normal full modules, you have 16 million form IDs. It doesn't make any difference if you have 2,000 more or less.
Right.
But for ESL files, the way ESL support was initially released, you could have 2,084 new records in an ESL file. So ones that needed their own new form ID. That's the limiting factor of why you can only have exactly that many new records, because that's how many possible new form IDs are in the ESL format.
Okay.
And but that was because form IDs from 0 to 2084 were reserved for other game purposes, and every single ESL file only had like half of the possible form ID space available.
Okay.
So they made a change in Fallout 4 where with a newer header version, you now could have ESL files that could have twice as many new records, 4,095 instead of 2,084 new records.
Okay.
And that's existed in Fallout 4 for quite a while, but it wasn't in the ESL support for Skyrim Special Edition. And with that latest update, they actually backported that into Skyrim Special Edition.
Wow, that's actually pretty huge.
Which means that you can have ESL files that have 4,095 new records, and they actually included this resource file with assets for modders to use, and that is definitely in this new format. And for that, it was then actually required that I update Xedit to properly support that. Instead, it looks like records that are supposed to be new records in these files would show up as overwrites of hard-coded records.
That makes sense.
So that is actually only supported in the latest version of Xedit right now. That's 4.15b, which is currently only available on the Xedit Discord. I hope in the next few weeks I'm getting a new version together that I can put out on Nexus Mods.
Nice.
But if currently somebody wants to work with these newer Skyrim Special Edition files, they need to use the Xedit that you can currently get on the Xedit Discord.
I see 6,000 mod load order in the future now. That's a nice little bump. I remember people were hyped about that in Fallout 4.
The number of mods doesn't increase. The possible maximum number of mods is about 4,200 something. But each of these ESL files can have twice as many new records.
So you could just collapse a bunch of these ESLs together then. So you get less mods, but more content.
I think they introduced that in Fallout 4 because most of the Creation Club stuff is released as ESL, and they certainly had some ESL which had a few more records than they could actually support. So I assumed
Right.
that was the time when they made this change in Fallout 4, so that they could. There are a number of Creation Club releases which are between these limits, so they have more than 2084. 2048 and less than 4059 records. So they specifically added this because they had a number of creations that needed that, or they would have instead had to release them as ESM and taking a full load order slot.
Yeah. So now, well, it's to our benefit, right? And I think I think Skyrim probably will benefit from this more than Fallout would even. So it's cool that they brought it back. Just there's probably tons and tons of mods that can be ESL now with that little limit increase, which is pretty awesome, especially for these people pushing these crazy load orders out there. Eck, we left you silent for too long. I want to come back to a question I asked earlier. I had asked too many questions at once, and then we focused on one. Have you seen any sign in your digging that we're going to get real mods ever in 76? Are you seeing any hope for it? Like whether it be like signs because there's mentions of it in files, or signs in that you can see that the game's engine kind of still supports it nicely. Like what are your thoughts on that?
So I've heard whispers of how they plan on doing mod support. I don't know if that's still how accurate that was, or if that's still going to be a thing. I haven't seen much in the way of them implementing anything to allow for mod support. I mean, there's still stuff in 76, like some of the Creation Club stuff. It still exists in 76, like the menus and all that.
Okay.
So I mean, they could probably piggyback off of that, but it's hopeful. Everybody is hopeful for it. I'm still optimistic about it.
Okay. What do you think the way that, because I was always curious about how they would roll that out. Like the best example I could think of was like how you can do modded Minecraft servers, and you log in and your game just downloads all the mods from the server. I would assume it would be something like that. And they have kind of tested the waters with that because you can host your own servers now, right? They're in their cloud. It's not like it's not like you're spinning up a AWS server yourself or something. Like you do it in there. It's in game through the menus. I assume that would be something like that. Is there any, like, I guess part of this comes down to, you said you got in trouble for monitoring things in memory. Are you, like, now that you've kind of got a little pass on that, I assume that you do it occasionally to help with security testing. Have you been able to suss anything out from that about how that would work, like based on the private servers that you can host? Like the ones that you can host officially. I know there's another discussion here with the community, old private server thing, but like with the existing where you can like spin up your own private world. Have you been able to ascertain anything from that by monitoring stuff?
I mean, that seemed to be like their initial way to get some like pseudo mod support. So like being able to change some server based settings, but
so that system doesn't download anything when people go to it, right? It's just they just have a bunch of server wide variables that can change. It's pretty simplistic. It's a lot like some of the game modes we've seen in other games. Like I think Overwatch had this for a little while, where I don't know if they still do, where you could they still do. Yeah, you could spin up your own little game mode, but it was relatively limited what you could pull off with it.
Oh, I play Overwatch actually. It's very, very, very comprehensive now. Like you can do a lot of things.
Okay, it's pretty robust now. So do you think do we ever get anything like that in 76 as their mod support, air quotes, or is that too much based on what you know about the way the game is set up?
Well, the way the private world works is they're able to change global variables that are in the ESM that change how things work, and they get transmitted back down to the client through a game message. And the client says, okay, now this global value is this. potentially they could do things where they transmit entire forms.
Okay.
Like the client wouldn't even need to have them. That would probably be like if they were to do allow mods that were more than just so somebody makes their own weapon, for example. Like when you join a world, they could potentially, say, oh, there are mods in this world. Would you like to download the mods? And you click yes, and it just downloads a package.
Mm-hmm.
There would have to be a lot of scrutiny as to like what's being uploaded and downloaded.
Right. There's some serious security issues here. But at the same time, you could say the same thing about the single player games, right? Like we all download thousands of mods for all these other games, and they could just as easily be inflated with malware or some awfulness,
right?
As could be done that. So like I feel like we've got the only reason I guess that 76 would be you'd have to be a little more careful with is that there is money loss potential, right? Because like people have their credit cards stored in their game profiles, and they have atoms which have intrinsic value to people. So like there's a little more incentive for people for bad actors to show up in the 76 system.
Exactly. I mean, we've had issues in the past, not quite that big, but like there was an exploit that allowed you to steal other players' inventories.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah, that was. The worst part about it was it became prolific around Christmas time.
Oof.
And Bethesda was on vacation.
Yeah.
So it took about 2 weeks before they were able to get a handle on it. But they did get a handle on it.
And the game would have died pretty quickly if that had not gotten under control.
Luckily, private servers were still a thing at the time. Like they hadn't been around very long.
Yeah.
The Fallout first, 8-player private world.
Right. So you could just block people out, and just not let anybody in. Yeah.
So I mean, at least in the data mining server, like we'd have people advertising, "Hey, you want to play the game? You want to do it safe? You can. I'll spin up a world for you."
Yeah.
And that was really good. We took stock of people who got their inventory stolen, and we tried to replace what we could. But I mean, obviously we couldn't do that for everybody. But some of like the people who got like their biggest, most expensive, people who had legacies and got them stolen, just we would do whatever we could to try to at least help them along.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty brutal. I remember like having I think everybody who plays an MMO has had their account hacked at some point, and that is so devastating logging in. But having it happen in real, like logging into your account and finding it naked is one thing. But that sounds like it was happening in real time. You're watching it happen in front of you. Like that's brutal.
Yep. Yep. The only things that could not be taken were things that were character bound, or things that were actually like equipped at the time.
Got it. But like all of your, was it like stuff on your person or your stuff in your stash too, where they could just like raid your camp?
It was just your on-person inventory. They couldn't hit your stash, which was good. Stash is stored entirely separate.
Got it. Okay. That's no fun, especially because you would just watch your stuff disappear. Like, that sucks. Well, it's good to hear that is taken care of. So where's your relationship now with Bethesda? And like there's now a lot of different, as far as I understand, there's several studios working on maintaining 76. Does I don't know what interaction do you have with any of those? Like, do you guys still have a good relationship with Bethesda and your ability to like feed them information? Like, are they still taking everything? Like, you guys probably know as much as they do, if not more than a lot of the folks there do, about the way the game runs and helping them discover flaws. Do you have a good relationship there? Is it kind of a what would you say? Is it all friendly, or is there a little bit of animosity there? Like, how's that play out now?
As far as I'm aware, it's all friendly. They're like, multiple people have fun chats with Bethesda devs or community managers. I know of a couple people who actually talk to some of the devs and DMs. By the way, don't DM the devs if you're in my server. Don't just DM the devs, please. But for the love of don't. Give them their space. They give us our space.
Sure.
But
like they treat you guys with respect. They understand that you guys are well knowledgeable, and so if you bring something to their attention, then they're going to take it seriously and not just be like, "Nah, we got this, buddy."
Yeah, and the same thing goes. If they notice something, they'll come. They can come to us, and we'll make sure to take a look at it. And we do take their privacy very seriously. So like if again, don't DM them if you want to stay in my server.
Yeah, that's cool. That's kind of like you've hit your target goal, right? That was how when you started this, the goal was you wanted to help figure out what's going on. Well, I like this game. Why isn't it working the way I want it to? And you dug in, you found out the problems, and you're able to deliver them to the source who can take care of them. That's awesome. Mission accomplished, right? Not that it's an ongoing mission because it's a live service game, but still, that's pretty awesome to hear. That's a great success story there. So there's something I had on my list to ask you, Elminster. Are you the one who coined the method, or is that somebody else?
Yes, that is basically my work.
That is you. Okay. So I wanted to ask you to just briefly try and describe the method in a way that most people can grasp it, and talk about how much happier you would be if everybody followed it. Because I remember reading this and I was like, wow, this is intense. Like somebody cares about this a lot. And it was you. That's awesome. Yeah. Tell us about the method and try and spitball it for some of us aren't too quick, myself included. So if you could dumb it down for me.
Yeah. The general thought by most mod users seem to be, I can just download all of these mods and I just run them together, and maybe I do something like a bash patch or some automated process, and then it all works nicely. And if you really start digging into all the details, that's simply not true. There are no automated tools that can really take care properly of all these little incompatibilities and conflicts and stuff between different mods. And like in the beginning, the workflow for most people was they create a whole load order with mods, and then they run some type of automated tool, bash patch or whatever. And then maybe they use Xedit to look for conflicts. And if at that time you look for conflicts and think, oh, I'm going to fix up this bash patch a little bit, then you run into what I used to call the wall of red. Because then you suddenly see in Xedit on the left side of your screen a list of 200, 300, 400 files, all highlighted in red. Every single one has some type of conflicts in it. And you simply say, oh my God, no.
I've seen this wall of red and I feel that exact way.
Yes. Now, the method, for lack of any other name, is a specific workflow that I came up with, in addition with putting functionality into Xedit to support this workflow, that allows you to get human eyes on every conflict, but as efficiently and with as little repetition as possible. Yeah, so you want to see every conflict one time, decide how to fix that, and then you don't want to keep seeing that again, which is this wall of red effect. So the method is a specific workflow where you start with no mods installed, and then I created something called mod groups. And mod groups is basically a way how you can tell Xedit that these particular mods, if they are loaded together in this order, you can, with a lot of specifics that you can specify, say this all together should behave as if it was one mod, and I don't want to see all the internal conflicts that exist from this group of mods. The winning overrides are all okay and include all the intention of the changes that may exist from other mods that are part of this group. And this is a mechanism through which you can say, okay, I have right now Skyrim, the base game installed with all the DLCs. And if you just start SSE edit, you see a lot of conflicts already. But the idea is these conflicts are okay because they are already resolved internally and the winning overrides are fine. And then you can simply create a mod group which says treat all these 4 or 5 files together as if they were one. And if you then look for conflicts, you see 0 conflicts. Great. Now you have a good foundation on which you can start building your own setup. Now you add one new mod, one only, and you look for conflicts. And then you can create patches to resolve these conflicts as far as they need to be resolved. And once you are finished with creating your patches, if you run that, you still see lots of conflicts, which are false positives. Because a conflict really just says this record is modified in different ways by different modules. It doesn't really say, is that good, is that bad, is the winning override correct or not? That's not what conflict means in this context in Xedit. It simply means there are differences. And you have to decide after looking at the data, is this correct? Am I happy with the final outcome?
I think that is worth repeating. So because I think a lot of us mod authors, we will get people who are learning how to patch who will come to us with oh, you've got all these conflicts when I load your mod into Eckserah. It's like, well, conflict isn't necessarily bad. It just means that we are both making changes to the same record. It's not good or bad. Yes. It requires a human to decide if it's good or bad.
Exactly. You need to look at the data and you need to figure out what is the intention of the change from these different mods. And then you need to decide what does the final winning override need to look to preserve as much of the intention of these different mods as possible. Or you also have to make a value judgment yourself. If you have different mods that make conflicting, in their intention conflicting changes, then you have to decide what is it that I really want in my game at the end. Do I want what this mod wants, or do I want what that mod wants? Do I want a combination of both? You have to make your own decision for your game how you want this, and can then create appropriate patches. And once you're finished with creating these patches for that one mod you just installed, then you can say, okay, I'm now creating mod groups which say that out of these conflicting mods, the final winning override that I have right now is exactly the one I want. So you don't need to show me all these other previous versions anymore. And after you create these mod groups and start again, you will be back to 0 conflicts shown. This is the point that you always need to keep returning to in the method. It's a loop with I install one mod, I resolve the conflicts, I create mod groups, I'm back at 0 conflicts shown. No wall of red, just everything white, not a single file shows as conflict.
So it's like a slow and methodic, hence the method, way to build your giant load order before you dive into the game and crash because you went too gung-ho.
Yes. Now, one of the big advantages is if you follow the method correctly, after installing every single mod and resolving the conflicts, you have a startable, workable game. Yeah. So, and it's actually part of the method that really after you are finished with installing one additional mod and you're back at 0 conflict shown, you have created all your patches or so, you should probably actually start the game and COC to the different places where the mod makes changes or so, just to try them out, have a look, see if everything works in game before you start with the next mod. There are people normally that install 100 mods at a time and then start the game and it explodes in their face and they have no idea where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And the method is a very methodical workflow which allows you to build your load order step by step, mod by mod. And with every single mod you install, you only see the new conflicts that are caused by this new mod.
Yeah.
And then you resolve them.
Now so are the mod groups stored as separate, like a metadata file that then next time you load it up, it'll load it back up?
There are text files called .mod group.
Okay.
And they are attached to one existing module or ESP file. So when you create a mod group, it actually asks you what module do you want to attach this mod group to? And then it creates a file with the same name as the ESM or ESP, but with the extension mod group, and it puts that mod group into that file. And mod authors could actually, like if they make patches available for download together with their mod, they could create mod groups and distribute them together with their mod.
That's what I was going to ask next, because the unofficial patch does that, includes the mod groups.
The unofficial patch does that because the basic assumption is if you have the base game plus the unofficial patch resolves every conflict that might still exist between the DLCs in the base game. And if you have this constellation, Skyrim, ESM, the 4 DLCs, the unofficial patch, that together is one unit where every winning override is correct. So you don't need to see any of the in-between versions that all these records have, and that is what the mod group does. It helps you to hide away the mod group doesn't so much like they hide conflicts. What the mod group does is it hides specific complete versions of records. And because you say the winning override already contains everything that I need from that.
Right.
And by hiding that record completely and then running the normal conflict detection code that Xedit uses, the conflict is gone because the whole record is not taken into account for calculating this conflict status.
Yeah. So in a way, like one of the advantages that like I'm envisioning in my head of if I was going to go set up to build a new play order, a load order to play with, is I could take my like foundational mods, like it's like this 40 mods I will never play without, and like work that out and work out the mod group, and then that is my stable base for all future playthroughs, and it will, in theory, that mod group I just don't ever get rid of that, keep it with the files, and I'm always way ahead, right? And just like it saved, there's a dozen hours saved because this is always rock solid.
If you're following the method to actually generate this base structure, you would end up with a lot of small mod groups instead of one huge one. But the end result is the same. You have one basic. If you have one basic setup that, after following the method, shows 0 conflicts shown, that is your foundation.
Yeah.
And anything you want to change now, you put one mod on top of that. You only see the conflicts that this one new mod generates with all the other stuff. And you can just resolve these few conflicts and move on to the next mod. And if you follow the method completely correctly, with great attention to detail, then you're even able at any point say, okay, this mod I added 5 steps ago, I have changed my mind, I don't want it. I removed that, and you should still have 0 conflicts shown, and it should just work to remove that mod.
Gotcha. Now, do you know? Are you familiar with Wabbajack and what's the one that Nexus offers officially? Collections.
Collections.
Yes. Do both of them? So I'm pretty sure Wabbajack supports everything, but like, do you know does Collections support distributing mod groups with people's packs?
I haven't looked into that, but I would assume so, because Collections also support distributing loose files, and mod groups are essentially nothing except a loose file. So
yeah, it would just be interesting. That's one of the things I've always thought would be really cool about the Collections and Wabbajack thing, and I don't know how much this has taken place because, as we've discussed many times here, none of us play the damn games anymore. But like, it seemed like a cool idea to have, a really well done foundation of like, here's your core mods that just, your unofficial patches and your maybe utility mods that you're just like, well, I'm never going to play without these, to just have like packs of those with the mod groups, so that way you have a whole, like a starting point, because a lot of, I think a lot of us end up playing, if you looked at most people's big mode orders, they'd have, 30 or 40 mods in common, because they're just so ubiquitous now that it seems like that would be an advantage. And the mod groups seem like a thing that doesn't get used a lot, but is very, very powerful, especially for people.
Yes, it is very powerful. The interesting thing about the mod groups is, I added basic mod group functionality. You didn't have a visual editor in Xedit to do them. You had to just create the text file yourself. I looked it up, TES 4 edit version 1.02
Oh, wow.
in 2007.
So it's been brewing for a while.
And I put that in, and back then I published the version on the Bethesda forum, and I put out the release thread and said, here's this new great thing, best things in sliced bread, mod groups, and I explained what you can do with them, and the general reaction was, okay, and then really nothing happened with mod groups, except that I used it intensively for myself, and it was used internally for creating FCOM, I think, or at least I used it when creating my own Oblivion setup.
Sure.
Like I used the proto version of the method myself in 2007 or so already. But then really nothing happened with that until in 2018, I think, when I came back to actually working on Xedit, and I spent about 6 months full time, where I took time off work and spent 6 months full time developing what became Xedit 4.0. Yeah, so that was 6 solid months of development effort that went into that, and at that time I also said, let's revive mod groups and actually give them like an editor in Xedit where you can visually edit and create them and so on, make them more approachable.
Yeah.
And that is also around that time that I formalized my ideas about what the workflow, the method is, and published that.
That's
as
when that
simply,
got published. Okay, yeah.
It was a simple post with just a list of bullet points: do this, and repeat. The method at its core is very simple. It's not that complex.
No.
The biggest problem, and that is the reason for the relatively large learning curve, is you need to actually be able to look at the conflicts and understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Which means that for every game where you want to apply that, you need to learn what all the different things that are in these records mean and how they interact. Now, if you actually go through all this effort, and a lot of people that have gone through it found it very, very valuable and rewarding in the end result, is you're not learning just patching and creating a solid load order for yourself. You learn absolutely everything that you would need to learn to be able to create your own mods. Yeah. So if you have gone with the method through a larger load order, you are basically, at least as far as editing module files, not meshes and external assets like that, but as far as all the information that is in these module files, you are ready to become a really good mod author, because you really need to understand how all this works and fits together.
Yeah. I would also say, like, if you're, the type of person or the type of concentration it takes to do something like the method, that's also, you're setting yourself up to be a very good developer in general, because that is also how we approach fixing problems of just like, you have to eliminate variables. You have to focus on one thing at a time. And like, that gives you a nice way to wrap it up. The mod group is like, now I've done that and I don't have to do it again. And it's nice. But absolutely. I see some of the most prolific modders started out as people just making patches, and because you just find like, oh, I know how these records work. I could change them to something else. I don't have to change them to, what mod XYZ did. Like, now I know how to change the damage of that thing or the health of that thing because I've been patching it for so long. But it's just a good skill. Like, the method is, I can't remember the name of the engineering value, but it basically boils down to just eliminating variables and doing one thing at a time. Yeah. And it's a very sound principle, and that people would, especially if you're building these giant load orders, you will be much happier if you do it. So the method was like I wish I could remember the principle that it brought to mind when I first read it, but I was like, I appreciate that he's putting this out there, because more people do need to do this when they build their load orders, especially, any of these guys who are getting to, like, would you say 3K mods, somebody got up to? Like,
yes.
They have to be meticulous to get to there, because your game will implode if you don't.
To be fair, it's 3,000 modules, that's not 3,000 mods, because a lot of these are actually the patches that you create as part of the method.
Right.
Like the method instructs you to create what I call micro patches. Yeah. So basically, if you have a conflict between two different mods, you create a patch for just this one single conflict between these two different mods. And if you have a conflict between 3 different mods, then you first create patches between each pair, and then a patch 1 level deeper, which resolves any conflicts that might exist between the patches then. Yeah, so if you follow the method correctly, you end up with a very, very large number of patches. But that's actually the strength of the whole system, which allows you to then later say, okay, I want to remove that one single mod from my complete setup. And it just works, because all the patches that exist that have a dependency on that mod automatically can't be loaded anymore. So these fall to the wayside, but the rest all still works.
Right.
Whereas if you have what I call mega patches, yeah, so you have your 100 mod load order, you run bashed patch, you now have a bashed patch which has dependencies on all these 100 mods that you have.
Right.
And then maybe you do some manual editing to further resolve conflicts to this bashed patch or something like that. Okay, and now a week later, a month later, you decide, well, but that one single mod that I originally installed, I don't really like it. I want to remove that because I want something else. And you don't get that out of your mega patch anymore. You can't pick out the exact changes that are in your mega patch because of the existence of that one little mod. And it's basically impossible for you to adjust your mega patch so that you can remove that one mod. Whereas if you go with the method and all these micro patches, then you end up with a setup where you can simply say, I want to remove that mod, and it works.
You also get really cool bragging rights because it makes your load order sound more impressive. Like,
yes,
I'm up to 2,000 mods.
Yes.
Yeah. So side benefit if you like to brag about your numbers.
The people that have like 3,000 modules, they still have over 1,000 actual mods.
Right.
Hey,
gotta pad those numbers
they also
somehow.
have a lot of patches.
Right. That. Well, it's impressive, and it's cool that you have added that feature. Now, I had the actual question I had written for you, and I'm curious. My prediction is that we just discussed the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway in case I'm wrong. What is something in Eckserah you wished more people used or knew about?
Well, mod groups is definitely one of these things.
Yeah.
The other things is lots of people ask me how do I do this or that batch edit, make many changes to many records, many of the same type of changes, and then other people say, yeah, you can write a script for that or so. Actually, what has existed in Xedit long before the scripting agent was integrated is that you can just select multiple records from the same file, so not multiple versions of the same record, but I select 100 different weapon records, and I say compare selected, and now side by side it doesn't display the different versions of one specific record. Now it shows you that these 100 different records side by side, and you can see the differences between these 100 different weapons. And now you want to say, okay, I want to change that one thing for all of these 100 weapons. Okay. And in Xedit, you simply make that change in one place, and then you right-click and say copy to selected, and that value is duplicated across that complete row over all these 100 records.
That's amazing. I didn't know that existed. I use that compare selected all the time, and then I'm like dragging one at a time, and I'm like, I can't get to that 10th one. It's too far. This is irritating. I had no idea there was a copy to all.
Right-click, copy to selected, and that works at every node in the tree. So you can even say that you can say that for a single value inside a condition, or you can say that on the conditions node, and then all of your conditions are replicated across all these different records with a single click.
Oh man, you just upgraded me in Xedit. That is an awesome feature.
That is an extremely powerful function. The other thing you can do if you do this compare selected, if you right click in front on one of the labels, one of the row labels, you can say sort by this row.
Oh, interesting.
And then it adjusts the order, the column order, so that all the identical values in this row come one up. So it's sorted based on the value in that row.
As opposed to like because it defaults to load order, right? The sorting
default is form ID order. I
form
think.
ID order.
Or,
Okay.
yeah. And that's a very powerful feature. Like if you have 100 records selected and almost all of them have no value in a specific field, but you can see from the colors somewhere here is a value. Then you can either scroll sideways through these 100 or 1,000 different records looking for that value, or you simply right click there and say sort by this row, sort by this value, and then all the columns that have no value will end up on the right side, and all the ones that have some value here will end up on the left side. So you can right away then see, oh, these 3 records actually have a value in here and the other 1,000 don't.
You can tell that this was born from making patches. This is from the method. You needed a tool. And you're like, I'm tired of trying to find this. I'm tired of scrolling right. I'm going to make a tool to make it easier for myself.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Another thing you can do is if you have a form ID field in this compare selected, you can actually right click and say follow these form IDs, and then it does a compare selected on all the records that are being referenced. Like you have 1,000 records and they use 5 different form IDs in the same field spread over these 1,000 records. You right click on that, you select that option, and now you see these 5 records that are being referenced side by side.
Nice.
Yeah. And another important feature, which I don't know how often people use this, I hope most people use this because that's the central element of how navigation works in Xedit. You can hold the control key and click on a form ID and it jumps to that record.
Okay, can you? I'm trying to imagine how that works. So you where would you control click the form ID where you can't already see the record?
No.
You mean like so if I'm like, if it's a record referenced, yeah, I gotcha. Okay.
One record reference another.
Yeah.
And when you hold control and mouse over it, actually it puts a line under it, so you see that it works like a link.
Yep, I had no idea that was there.
If you then click on it, it jumps to that other record.
No idea that was there.
With this, you can very, very quickly drill into it. You start at some point and you go control click, control click, control click, control click, and you can figure out how these things connect with each other, how they work. And either at the top are 2 little arrow buttons. I don't know how many people have noticed these. With these, you can then go backwards again to where you came from. Or if your mouse actually has a 3rd and 4th button, which in browsers works like a back and forward button. These work in Xedit as well, so you can go control, click, 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 and then you click the backward button on your mouse to just jump back where you came from.
Oh man, that is super useful. I had no idea about that control click. I know there's tons of times where I'm like, where the hell does this record come from? And then I'm scrolling back through my plugins. That's fantastic.
Yeah, no. You can directly control click and it jumps there. Or you can, if you see the different record versions of a single record that you have currently selected, up on the column headers, you see the file names where this same different versions of the same record come from. You can actually control click on this to then automatically select that record from that file on the left-hand navigation preview. So you can actually jump to that other file that contains this record, and then you can see what other records might be defined in that file very easily without having to scroll through the list, opening notes, and then trying to search and find stuff.
Oh my God, we need to scrub this whole talk and just have you talk in the camera and show us how to use Xedit properly, because you just blew some minds, I'm sure. That's some super time savers.
Especially in the beginning when I added the Starfield functionality, I had a number of people that asked me questions, especially people that had not modded any Bethesda game before.
Yeah.
Like, how do I do this? And I did actually do some screen sharing sessions over Discord with various people where I spent an hour, 2 hours really showing them how to use Xedit. Now, the one thing that every user of Xedit really should do one time is when Xedit starts, it shows you this "What's new" message, and every user of Xedit should spend the time to just read through that whole thing from start to finish one time.
Hey, now,
Because
this is the Bethesda community. You know how we feel about reading things.
Yeah, I know. Because that, especially starting with Xedit 4.0, is the canonical documentation of everything that's in Xedit.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is the one thing I write.
Yeah.
This what's new. That is my document. What exists otherwise, like the tome of Xedit and other people are doing this.
Yeah.
But this what's new document, that is what I write every single time I make a change. I add new functionality and I explain as good as I can what is new, what does it do, when do you use it, how do you use it. And there's a lot of information in there, like the control click that is described in there as well, and
Yeah.
many other things.
Yeah, that's how I do. Like with Sim Settlements, I keep patch notes as I'm going, and all I do is update the patch notes thing, and then like other folks update the wiki, and I'm always wondering like how many times have I put something in the patch notes and just nobody knows that it's there, because I didn't explicitly show them. You know, like a lot of times people are like, it's sometimes it's useful to do that. It's just like you said, just screen share and be like, hey, check this out. Look at all these things you're not using. As I said, we could make a whole video of just you showing us all this cool stuff. But I am very excited to go now. Control click around. I think I screwed up some of my video footage. I'm recording our Discord icons because I was tabbing into Xedit while you were talking about it. Because I'm like, what? I can do that. I'm very excited to go play now. I'm going to geek out on Xedit because I am such a modder. Elminster, it has been fantastic to talk to you about all this stuff because there's a lot of history here. There's a lot of power here, and you have you're like the godfather of a whole lot of mods for a lot of games. So I'm glad we finally got a chance to talk, and I appreciate everything you do, and I hope you'll keep doing it for a long time. I hope Starfield's crazy reflection records don't burn you out, and we have many years of Xedit support in the future. So thank you.
I will certainly hope so too, and do my best to continue supporting. I have many more ideas of what I can all do with Xedit. I have enough ideas to work full time on Xedit. I just can't.
Hard to justify
Can't
that.
possibly it's hard to justify putting that amount of time in.
We need 10,000 new patrons. Go, folks, go. Yeah,
that would work.
Yeah, there you go.
It was an absolutely pleasure to be here, and I do hope we find maybe a way in the future to make some of these videos where I show you some things in Xedit. I think that's a good idea, and we should follow that up.
I agree. I think that would be very, very useful. I bet you there's a lot of cool stuff that only you and a handful of your closest friends know how to use, and the rest of us are floundering around doing it the hard way. Eckserah, thank you very much for joining today. It is really cool that there are folks working on, like, under the hood, digging into 76, trying to make that game the best it can be, because it started out in such a rocky start, and now it's got a wonderful community built up around it. And I'm sure the folks who are engaged all the time are very happy to have you around, showing them what's going on and helping the devs keep the game clean and working correctly. So I think you're doing a great service for all the folks who are playing 76 these days.
Oh, thank you. It's been great being here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's been awesome. So thank you guys again. I hope everybody learned some cool stuff today, and thanks for joining us. Okay, this is...